You're listening to Leaders of AI, the podcast that cuts through the noise to bring you real-world insights, right now applications, and future-shaping breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. Here are your hosts, Julia McCoy and Dave Shapiro.
Clearly, R1 has taken the world by storm.
NVIDIA tanked 17% in one day.
We're looking at a country that is willing to do literally anything to win.
Was this legitimately only $5 million? Was it stolen, or was it just the Chinese being clever?
They consider this, a war, basically, between the West and the East.
I'm not really sure what to think, because if you ask it, who produced you, it'll say OpenAI produced me.
Meta just... Number one, they threw away Llama 4 and just said, what we were working on is crap compared to this, so we got to start over again.
Hello, and welcome back to Leaders of AI podcast. My name is David Shapiro. I'm standing in for Julia today. She wasn't able to make it, but we have a really spectacular guest today, John Gibbs. I was on his podcast, Dr. Know-It-All, so there will be a link in the description if you want to check that out. But really, the most exciting thing is R1. So, John,
yeah.
what's going on with DeepSeek-R1? What are your initial thoughts?
Jeez, this is kind of a weird story, but I saw it when it popped up. And actually, I saw V3 a month ago when Andrej Karpathy made a note about that, way back when, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good considering this Chinese company, basically it sounds like on a relatively shoestring budget, and I just cut out. That's weird. Anyway, on a relatively shoestring budget, came up with a pretty good model. But then I saw this one and I tested it and I was like, yeah, it works great. And then I did a really deep technical dive on it for it's like a 50-minute video, super niche. I expected to get a couple thousand views. I was like, nobody's, and all of a sudden it was just like this. And I was like, what is going on? So I started looking around. I was like, oh geez, this has gone viral over the weekend. So yeah, so that's all within the last couple of days. And clearly R1 has taken the world by storm. And at least yesterday, the stock market was not happy. I haven't had a chance to look today, but I don't know if there's been a recovery, but NVIDIA in particular was hurting yesterday. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. For a quick reference for anyone in the audience who is not watching the stock market like a hawk, NVIDIA tanked 17% in one day. It was the largest sell-off in terms of capital capex lost in a single day. I think it was to the tune of $500 or $600 billion.
Yeah, they basically said it was. They lost one Stargate, so that's what they lost. $500 billion in that.
So it has since rebounded a little bit, but yeah. So clearly, it has sent shockwaves around the world. And I don't know if you saw, but Gary Marcus has been doing the rounds, all over. Let me just give you my take on R1 and see where we agree, disagree, or just whatever comes up. But really, so first, I think there's all the conspiracy theories, it didn't actually cost $5 million or it was stolen or whatever. And I'm not really sure what to think, because if you ask it, who produced you, it'll say OpenAI produced me. So does that mean that
it does not do that anymore, by the way? I checked and now it says I'm R1. So yeah,
okay.
They've covered that patched that over. So.
Right. So initially you could ask it who created you? It's I'm ChatGPT by OpenAI. And it's okay, clearly, maybe the weights were stolen, or they use synthetic data or stolen data or something. A lot of people told me, they're okay, well, we actually think that it's just that there's so much synthetic data out there that it leaked into the data set, but I don't know if I buy that. So what's your take? Was this legitimately only $5 million? Was it stolen, or was it just the Chinese being clever?
Yeah. So I think yes is the answer to all of that. So because like I said, I read the paper. It's a very, very, and I did that video, and it's when I got into the details about it, I was like, oh yeah, this is the way it needs to go. It's reinforcement learning. It's self-play. But what they did was, particularly for the R1 model, not the R10, but the R1, they gave it a cold start of, I think it was 800,000 samples of reasoning to give it a head start, basically to say this is what we're looking for. And within that, I think they generated a lot of that data from their older V3 model, but other places as well. And a lot of those other places might easily have been OpenAI or V3, which is what R1 is based on, could have had OpenAI training as well. So I think, yes, definitely everybody owes a big debt of gratitude to OpenAI because they basically used it for their training data.
Right.
As far as doing it on a shoestring, I have a difficult time understanding the budgets of these because I don't operate a data center. So I'm like, well, how much does it cost to run 10,000 GPUs for a week or something. Does that cost $1 million? It cost 10 million? I really don't have a good answer to that question. So hard for me to answer. But in terms of these companies having a lot of GPUs that are, let's say, like gray market GPUs,
Right.
stuff, I think they have a lot of GPUs and they're just not allowed to talk about it because, of course, they bought it through some other company that bought it through some other company that got it from NVIDIA. And, so I think that they are using a lot more GPUs than they're letting on. But I mean, it's open source. The inference engine is free. There's no rate limits on the API. It's a $2.19 per million output tokens. I mean, it's just insane numbers. So, unless the CCCP is like supporting them completely and just saying like, yeah, we'll just funnel all the money you need so you can undercut everybody else. Unless that's happening, they're legit doing it for way cheaper.
Yeah. No, and well, having spoken to plenty of experts in the space and also having been using this stuff since GPT-2, I mean, we see 10x reductions in token costs year over year.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, originally you paid for 1,000 tokens on GPT-3.
Right.
They were like, that's how expensive they were. It's like, I don't remember, it was like $5 for 1,000 tokens or something. So the cost of tokens is dropping exponentially. And that's a combination of better models, economies of scale, all that fun stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if they just said, you know what, we're gonna figure this out.
Right.
Now, so just taking a step back, one of my interests is like the geopolitics of it, the economics of it. So what do you think? Like, is this a Chinese psyop, or is this just good old fashioned competition or an arms race? Like, what's your take on it from that perspective?
I hesitate. I am not a conspiracy theory kind of guy. I'm an anti-conspiracy theory kind of guy. So my immediate take is it's not a conspiracy theory. They're not doing psyops, but it also is not at all outside the bounds of possibility because we're looking at a country that is willing to do literally anything to win. And they consider this, a war basically between the West and the East. So somebody said it was like a Sputnik moment. And I'm like, not exactly, because it's not like we haven't been doing anything. We've got a lot of stuff, but there was a certain coziness in Silicon Valley in the US and the West of like, oh, we're ahead. Yay, good for us. No one's going to catch us. And it's like, holy crap. So psyops or not. And the only way this would really be psyops is if the government was funneling a huge amount of money so that they could do this for free and basically pretend like it costs so little that they didn't care, that like the je ne sais quoi, they're like, oh, we don't care, but
this
it's actually
was a side project.
Yeah. Exactly. So I mean, that would be the psyops, but it is a legit program. It works great, and the weights and everything are there, and people have verified it. I can't run it. It's a bit big to run on my, my Mac at home, but people have verified it and it works as advertised. So, so psyops in the sense of, maybe it costs a heck of a lot more than they're saying it did, but in terms of having legitimate competition, and especially the reinforcement learning aspect of it, the self-play aspect of it, that is the part that's just, I think that's a dam breaking. That's like, there are no limits. I mean, you like to talk about the speed at which AGI and ASI are coming, and like suddenly we just took that was like a 10x. We just improved the speed, or I don't know, reduced the window. It's sooner than it was planning to be. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of exponential acceleration. Is all these things continuously happen sooner than you expect them to happen, and then when the frame moves up, then it moves up again, because we weren't really expecting to see like AGI that could run on a 3090 for a couple years, but this thing is pretty darn close. I've had fans and other people reach out, say, oh yeah, I downloaded one of the smaller versions and I've got it running locally on an NVIDIA 3090 or 4090 and it runs just fine. And they're like, this is actually useful without cloud. So what do you think from a commercial perspective or a business perspective? Like, is this just a sign of things to come where with commodity hardware, you're going to be able to run whatever models you need locally before too long?
Oh, I think so. I think we're going to have a stratification of models, that there's always going to be these frontier models that are going to require a significant chunk of hardware to run on, but those are going to become more and more and more niche. In fact, they're probably going to be used to train little baby models that you can run, potentially on your phone, potentially on your laptop, potentially on your desktop, or et cetera, all the way up to that. And that those models are the ones that we're going to use primarily. The big thing here, it's, Sam Altman got to give the guy credit. He said, we're eventually going to have AI too cheap to meter. And this is a big step towards that.
Right.
We're taking that nosedive. It creates a really interesting problem. And I think the reason the market was upset was they were like, whoa, tens to hundreds of billions of dollars have flowed into Silicon Valley companies to do this research. And they're like, was that really worthwhile? Was that a legit investment, or are we just throwing our money away and we could do this way cheaper? I did a video today, it just came out today, and I called it I call it the Mozart Paradox. I'm a big, huge fan of music, classical music, etc. And I've maintained for a long time, long before AI stuff was in the realm, that Mozart was the most genius, most creative composer, because the classical music box that he was in other words, the rules of how you could compose music, were incredibly tight when he was alive. And so you put somebody in a tiny little box, they're either going to stay in there and be boring, or they're going to figure out ways of busting out of there. And it makes them way more creative. And I've heard a bunch of other people talk about this too online, that what they did, what the US effectively did by shutting down the ability of these companies to get GPUs from NVIDIA and from AMD and so forth, the high-end GPUs, is they basically forced them to become more creative. And so look, they became creative. And it's like, how are we surprised at that? It's like, either you're going to give up, or you're going to be like, hey, wait, we can figure out this cool new thing, this cool new trick. Yeah.
You say, well, what do I have access to? So actually, the turn of phrase that I came up with for that is necessity is the mother of invention, but constraints are the father of creativity.
There you go.
Yep. And constraints do force you to have to either be more clever or reuse things that you don't already have. One thing that you mentioned earlier that hadn't fully materialized for me as the significance is, once these reasoning data sets are out there, you only have to generate those once. Now they can be used, every model can use it. Every other company can use these things. And so there's this accumulation of like this knowledge and data that's just happening publicly. And every time we have another generation of model, it's going to generate a whole bunch of synthetic data that the next generation of models. So there's this snowball effect that you really can't stop, and there's no moat at all, right? Like, no. That's my take. Is that your take?
Oh, absolutely. And I think if people thought there was a moat before, there definitely isn't one now. This just absolutely proved it. And the fact that they just gave it away. I also heard a rumor, and this is absolutely just a rumor at this point, but that Meta just, number one, they threw away Llama 4 and just said, what we were working on is crap compared to this, so we got to start over again. And number two, apparently they're paying, I guess 13 of their top researchers are making more than the apparent cost to train R1 each. So they're each making over $5 or $6 million per year. And they're like, wait, what are we doing with that? Why are we paying these guys this much money? So, yeah. So
this just was a wrecking ball throughout the whole industry. Hence the shot heard around the world sort of moment, certainly reflected in the stock market. So I have, before we pivot to, I do want to throw some of the questions that R1 generated to ask you, because I used it in Perplexity. So Perplexity was able to integrate R1 in a week flat. But are there any other general topics on R1 that you want to cover before we dive into these excellent generated questions?
All right. I love it. Let's see what R1 has to ask us.
Okay, so question number one that R1 and Perplexity generated for you is, by the way, providing a little bit of context for John, he's the CEO of Automattic, and so you do a whole bunch of stuff. But I wanted to point out that you're not just another podcast host on YouTube. CEO, PhD, you do all sorts of interesting things. So the audience won't be shocked at this question. Automattic's Skinner tool aims to revolutionize 3D animation by automating tedious tasks. How do you balance AI's efficiency with preserving human creativity in digital art?
Oh, geez. Okay. That's a really good question, R1. Nice job. Or Perplexity, whichever one. So this is something that we think about a lot, and we're actually involved in a project right now that, interestingly enough, we could tail into politics just a little bit if you want to, because the freeze on government grant spending actually impacts us directly. The fact that just got shut down today was like, uh-oh. So anyway, the company, the decision point. Well, okay. So the product, the which we came up with originally, was based on a classroom project that I did with some graduate students back in 2020, which was COVID year. And we were working on this thing, and it was a pain point for me personally. I just hate doing what's called weight painting for 3D models, which in short is you model something that looks like me or something, right? But you also have to put a skeleton in it or else it can't move. But then when you put a skeleton in it, how do you get like all this stuff as I move my arms and my legs and all that stuff around? Trying to get the skin to move properly over the bones is really complicated, and it's a pain in the ass, and it takes a really long time. So I was like, what if we could just make this happen? So we actually did in a classroom situation, and then the rest of it has been turning that into an actual commercial product. The interesting thing for us, I think that was a really good question about balancing the the gains of having AI versus having the creativity, or sorry, not wasting the creativity and the human capital as well. So we actually did a bunch of market research on companies and talked to people who do this job, and not a single person only did this job. This was one of their jobs, and it was their least favorite job. And they were like, absolutely, if you can take this away from me, please. What was that old commercial, Calgon, take me away? They're like, get rid of this thing. I don't want it anymore. So that made us happy, because we were like, okay, we're not going to upset anyone. We're just going to make them happy, because we're going to get rid of this crap that they don't want to do. It's an unseen job. It has to be done. It's thankless. So, for that, we feel pretty good about that. Now, there are other things that we're working on at the same time that maybe might impact employment a little bit more drastically. So that is something we always have to balance. It's an ongoing, it's a journey, not a destination. How's that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, so you had a teaser there. So what are you working on, or what are you seeing that might impact employment more directly? Is this like a job is this a labor substitution kind of tool that it might just put graphic artists out of business, or what kind of?
Well, it actually is in a completely different domain. We're actually working with a Fortune 500 company right now, contracted in. So that's why I can't really talk about it. I keep teasing this on my channel, going like, as soon as this product is released, we can talk about it, because then it'll be out in the wild. But it's like a couple of weeks from being released. But anyway, within that realm, you can imagine Fortune 500 companies have lots of employees, and they're like, where can we start to trim back on some of these employees and have AI do the work that is currently being done by humans? Now, what the sort of party line is, we're not trying to replace people. We're trying to improve them so they can do more work. And to be honest, this company, I honestly think that they're trying to do that right now. That's today. 6 months or a year from now, don't know. Could be
Right.
could be very, very different. But at this point, they have overworked employees and taking, a piece of the job that they have to do away from them. Same thing as I was talking about with the animation thing. It's like, it's a job nobody really wants to do. They want to be able to focus on other stuff. And that doesn't feel bad to me at this point. I feel like that's okay.
Yep. When I was doing AI consulting, that was one of the primary things when a company would come to me and say like, how can AI? And I'm like, where does it hurt? Like,
Yeah.
doctor,
Yeah.
show me where it hurts. Let's start there,
Yeah.
because if we can alleviate any of that pain, you're going to get immediate return on investment.
Exactly.
Excellent. Great first question. Second question. Your NSF SBIR grant focuses on AI for creative workflows.
Right.
What technical hurdles did you face in training models to interpret artistic intent, and how did you overcome them?
Oh my gosh, that's a good one too. So the SBIR is exactly the thing I was talking about, that I don't know if we're going to have access to those funds anymore after today. So, but anyway, the big problem for us is that there was no. You got to remember, you got to dial this back a couple of years to when we started this. There was no really good 3D standardized. I don't know. Like, right, I'll just take a 2D image, right? You have a JPEG image or something, or a PNG, doesn't matter. You have 1,000 by 1,000 square. And so every one of those is a pixel. It's got a color. That's pretty straightforward, right? You know how to interpret that. 3D doesn't really have an equivalent to that. So the data structure by itself is a huge undertaking. And it's something in the classroom version of this that we actually got patented. We were just a little bit like hand wavy. We're like, yeah, we can make it work in this specific circumstance. But to try to broaden that out to work in an arbitrary circumstance was, I honestly think, the biggest challenge. It's the data structure, and then how do you train on that data structure to get the correct results with relatively minimal a data set. You just don't have that big of a data set. So those were big challenges we had to overcome.
So let me make sure I understand. So the basically images, that's a very well standardized format. It's,
Right.
you've got a discrete location and color vector. But
Right.
then with 3D data, there's many different kinds of ways you can represent spatial information. Because you think like, okay, well, there's a solid object or there's an environment. Are you doing what is it, like a Cartesian coordinate system or something like that? So that was the primary problem that you confronted.
Yeah, and it's also an arbitrarily large environment. So an image is 1920 by 1080. That's HD, right? What is the size of a 3D environment? It could be a character, it could be a block, it could be the size of World of Warcraft. It could be this gigantic open-ended world. It's like, well, holy crap, how do we deal with that amount of different? It's like having a picture that goes from this all the way up to the scale of like, a city or something. It's like, well, oh geez, how do we handle this stuff? So that is a pretty big challenge. And it's actually been, it's something that's in the literature too. You can see a lot of other researchers confronting that and trying to figure out how to dice that up the proper way.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay. That does sound like quite the challenge. It's one that I don't envy you having to have tackled.
But it's really fun too. It's been fun. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Question number 3. As a CEO with an AI startup, how do you prioritize between commercial viability, such as investor demands, and pushing the boundaries of AI research or innovation?
So I think that the SBIR actually was a big advantage to us because, of course, that is specifically to commercialize intellectual property. It more or less, well, I mean, the whole point of it was to take something that's a research project and turn it into more of a commercial project. This is phase 1. There's also a phase 2. There's also a phase 3 if you get there. And so that takes a lot of pressure off. But still, there's always this like, okay, well, there's a milestone you have to hit by this date. And trying to get a product right now, the thing that we're dealing with, we're just about to pass our product off to quality assurance to the company. And it's a heavy duty thing. It's like, this has got to work, right? When we hand this off, they're going to come back and if they list off a whole bunch of bugs that are showstoppers, that means our product doesn't go to market. So it's like, we've been alleviated from that a little bit by the grant for the 3D animation thing, but we still have to confront that because otherwise we don't have a viable product, right? It's either this product works for people or it's more of a pain than what they're doing right now. And if it's honestly, even if it's not like, let's say 10 times better than what they're doing right now, they'll just be like, it's fine. I'll just do what I'm doing now. No big deal. Yeah,
that makes sense. So you still have, even though the selective pressure or the selective process is slightly different, you still have to hit that product market fit where it's got to be a compelling enough use case to pass muster.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
excellent.
I think that Elon Musk talks about that too. He's like, or I think it was Elon. Anyway, he was like, you can't just come into the market with a car that's like as good as a gas car. It's got to be like better. You have to show people like, oh, this is way cooler than a gas car. So I want this. I'll spend the extra money, because at the beginning they were very expensive. So.
I first heard that kind of mentality on, I can't remember who it was. It was the CEO. It was either Beyond Meat or one of the vegan meat alternative labs. And they said through research, they realized that the alternative had to be better tasting, healthier for you, more sustainable, and cheaper. It had to be better in all metrics to be adopted. And that's actually how I came up with the better, faster, cheaper, safer mantra for AI adoption is once you cross that threshold, whether it's a product or replacing a human, if you're better, faster, cheaper, safer than a human or the other product, then it becomes inevitable, but you have to hit all of those.
Yeah. It's like gravity at that point. It's like, it doesn't matter what people want. They're still going to fall down. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. The lower energy state is where you kind of default to.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 4, we're switching to leadership and ethics. You lead a team blending AI engineers and digital artists. How do you foster collaboration between these disciplines, and what's the biggest leadership challenge in managing these teams?
Man, I would say actually it's easier than being a professor. Like being a professor, you're trying to herd cats constantly. So I've actually found it kind of I wouldn't say a relief, but just a refreshing change where, you have 20 plus students in a classroom and there's just this massive range of ability levels and you have to deal with that. With with a company, this is, I don't know if this is answering the question in the right way, but it's like you can hire and fire people at will. It's like if they're not working out for whatever reason, even if they're great people, then just don't work out right. You know, they just move on to the next job or something. But that provides a much more contained environment. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is I personally am both of those things. I have spent my life being a creative, but also being highly technical. You know, my PhD is actually in English literature, but I did computer modeling of language back in the 90s when that was like, what the hell are you doing? Even my advisor was like, she was like, what are you doing in this thing? And I was like, trust me, bro, this is going to work. You know, so anyway,
This will be so cool.
This will be so cool in like 25 years, man.
Was
So
that bag of
anyway.
words kind of stuff?
It was that, and well, no, it was actually word trajectories. I was actually looking at them sequentially. So it was, I wouldn't even call it necessarily AI. It was sort of modeling of the language that was there. So yeah, it's really weird and very primitive. And I look back on it and I kind of laugh, but I was like, I was doing this. So, you know, I've always just loved being, and being, honestly, being a designer in the 3D animation space, and also sound design and video post-processing, all of that kind of stuff. You have to walk that line constantly. It's always like you're a creative person, but you have to know the tools, you have to know the technology, you have to keep up with the technology. You know, all of that stuff is incumbent on you as an artist. So I just love to live in that space. So I find it fairly easy.
That makes sense. Okay, so long story short, you straddle both spaces, so you can talk to both teams. That actually, I just rewatched the original trilogy of Star Wars, and it reminds me of George Lucas, who had the technical mastery but also the storytelling, so he could do both. He could talk to the whole team. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Next question. AI tools like DALL-E have sparked debates about originality and copyright. How does Automattic address ethical concerns around AI-generated art, especially regarding attribution?
Right. So that is a big issue for us, actually. So I'll start with us because we're just a tiny microcosm. And the way we've avoided it is we have synthetically generated a lot of our data or paid for it ourselves. Like, so we're pretty clean. I feel like our hands are clean. Now, as for the broader picture, Dolly, Runway, Midjourney, whatever, Sora, for example, in their YouTube videos, the N11 Labs and Suno, just on and on and on. All of these companies have trained on data that's out there. And of course, in an ideal world, everyone who is a creative artist, including you and me, because our videos have been taken and trained on, I guarantee you, at some point, right? They've been ingested, that everyone is owed compensation. The reality of that is that will never happen. There's no chance in hell that's happening. And the horse is out of the barn. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. You know, actually, you're old enough to remember the whole LimeWire thing. You know, Napster, LimeWire, all that stuff. And you know, that was like, what was that? The late '90s, right around 2000. And it was, you know, you bought a CD or a tape or something, and then you would take it home and listen to the Counting Crows or whoever it was, and then
Dave Matthews Band,
whatever. But then what happened was that all of a sudden people are like, wait, we can stream this stuff and we can torrent it and we can do all these things. And of course, Napster got sued and they were basically put out of business. But in the meantime, LimeWire and other torrent like attribution, onion router things that you couldn't really catch anymore. So they came up, speaking of being constrained, came up with a creative solution to the problem of being sued. So at this point, I'm like, sure, sue OpenAI if you want to. Maybe you'll win. Awesome. Doesn't matter. It is completely pointless at this point because it's done. The
right.
harm is done. Yeah.
The technology is irrepressible. Like the guy in Serenity, you can't stop the signal, Mal. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Or like I said earlier, gravity. I mean, it's basically we've hit the point where it's better, faster, cheaper. Did you say safer also?
Safer, yeah.
I don't know about safer.
If you're less likely to get sued.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the safer part, maybe not, but the rest of it is
right.
No questions. That's where we are.
Well, it's the same reason why people signed up for Pandora and Spotify is, oh, well, you give me something where I can just stream the music for $3 a month. That's where it started. Of course, they're a little bit more than that. But it's like, hey, I don't have to manage a library or expose myself to the legal risk of pirating music or whatever. So it's like, cool, just give consumers a better option, leveraging this new technology. All right, next question. Last one on leadership and ethics. You've emphasized transparency in AI development on your YouTube channel. How do you operationalize this value at Automattic, particularly while explaining AI decisions to non-technical stakeholders?
Oh, that's interesting. We just had a problem with that today.
Very timely question.
Yes, I can't go into details, but there was a question that indicated they had absolutely no idea. We're like, yeah, we can do that if you give us 2 months and several hundred hours worth of development time to do that, which seemed very easy to them. So I think transparency is critical. I am all about transparency, but there's a language thing. And I don't mean like, Chinese versus English. I mean, and I speak about this as a designer oftentimes, is like, you have to have a technical language and a creative language and a business language for business people. You have to shift your language. So you don't just have to be transparent, but say like, well, the 32 billion parameter model with, XYZ token count generated per second. These guys are like, their eyes are glazing over, right? You have to, yeah, you speak the business language. It's like, it's going to cost you this much and the latency is going to be this much. And, these are the metrics that you care about. So I think that's even more critical than transparency. You can be transparent and still opaque, because you can just, it's like Star Trek. I mean, you're a big Star Trek fan. This is the classic Star Trek. It's like, what does that mean? Well, it's blah, 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 blah math. It's like flushing a toilet and watching the water go down. They say a bunch of gobbledygook and then they give you a metaphor so you can understand it. So it's that metaphor. It's like, you got to tell people like something they can understand in order for it to, to go over well.
I would often bridge that gap when people would say, this is, 2023 and 2024, people would ask me, oh, I want to implement RAG on my application. That's retrieval augmented generation. I'm like, what do you think RAG is going to do for you? If you can explain that to me, then I will tell you why this is useful. But if you just heard it, that it's a useful new thing, like we gotta make sure that we understand what we're talking about here.
Right. I could add to that I have had a lot of experience lately with prompt engineering, and for a long time I thought it was a joke, and I was like, blah blah blah. But I'm going to actually go into this in much more detail in a video coming up soon. But I'm certain that prompt engineering, I disagree with not learning to code anymore, and this is why. And Andrej Karpathy was right, except it's backwards of what he said. He said English is going to be the new programming language. Yes, but English will have to be catered to a programming mindset in order to be useful. And so you'll talk to your computer, but it's not enough to just go like, I want a web page. It's like, well, yeah, it'll generate you something, but it's not going to be what you want. It's just going to be some random ass web page. So the more specific, and so programming in my mind is syntax. Yes, that's the least important part. It's all about the way you think. It's like,
context
how do
and everything.
You think?
Yep.
Yeah. It's like, how specific can you be in your thinking, and how organized can you be in your thinking, and what is the context? How are you dealing with all the different stakeholders in a more corporate situation who want this and this and this and this? Those are programming. That's engineering.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, my wife is she just transitioned out of product ownership, and that's exactly what a PO does, is talk to all the stakeholders and get them to articulate what it is that you want and why. What are the design affordances and requirements? And that is a non-trivial task. And yes, learning to articulate yourself, that's honestly one of the best things that I have learned from working with AI every day for the last 3 or 4 years, is you have to think, okay, how do I get exactly what I want out of this machine, provided all the necessary context and everything else. Yeah. So it's still English, but you're right. I like how you said, like, you have to still think like a programmer.
Yeah. I was saying English asymptotically approaches programming. I mean, effectively, you're still speaking English, but you're getting closer and closer and closer to what a traditional programming language would be. At least at this point. Maybe in a couple of years, that won't be the case anymore, and you can be much more loose. But at this point, no, absolutely not.
All right. Let's move on to, we got 2 sections left, 5 questions. Okay. If we can get to them.
I feel like I'm on Jeopardy.
For 400, yeah. All right. So, industry insights and trends. Question number 7. At Tesla's AI Day number 2, you noted that full self-driving would be solved in a few years. How do lessons from autonomous vehicles inform Automattic's approach to AI reliability and in creative tools?
Okay. I think the biggest lesson, and this is way more broad than my company, the biggest lesson from Tesla's work on full self-driving is the world is edge cases. It's like the 80-20 rule has never been clearer. That first 80%, is I think actually somebody said it like 90-10, but somebody said the first 90% takes 90% of the time. The second 10% or the last 10% takes 90% of the time. And in the case of Tesla, it's probably 900% of the time. So, you think you're done. You're like, oh, we're almost done. We only have like these 5 things that we have to do. And it's like, oh yeah, but those 5 things are insanely complicated. And the world is, I own a couple of Teslas and I drive them around on full self-driving all the time. And I'm like, wow, never seen that before. The other day, I was driving, it was a bit windy, and a garbage can just blew right into the road in front of me. And I was like, well, that's a new one. I hadn't seen that before. That's a corner case. So,
There you go. As a former automation engineer, yes. The main process, assuming that you can control all the primary gates and everything, yeah, but it's life is all in the edge cases and the corner cases. That's a really good like mantra to live by. The world is edge cases.
And this is why neural networks are beautiful, because they're arbitrary function approximators. And you get to a point, at some point you can heuristically code anything, right? And I mean, you can heuristically code many, many things, which is exemplified in the fact that we're using computers that are primarily heuristically coded. That's a human going rule of thumb. This is the way it should be done. But eventually, let's just say you did this for driving, and the stop sign example. It's like, okay, if this, then this, but if this, then this. Oh, but if this, then this, right? Different lighting circumstances, different angles, whether it's half hidden by a tree. I mean, just on and on and on and on. And you could imagine a million if-then statements that it has to flow through in order to decide if that's a stop sign, right? Some crazy thing like, and that's one thing. And so you want something that's more of an arbitrary function approximator, not something that's deterministically blah, it would be insane. And that's why Tesla even said that. I think they said they deleted about 300,000 lines of code and replaced it with a neural network. They just were like, here you go. What you trade off, however, is training. You have to have a lot of data and a lot of time training to overcome the fact that you're not using human knowledge in there in the first place.
Right. Yeah, because it's generalizing from experience that's not really human experience. So it's a different mechanism. Yeah. Reminds me of back in 2007 or 2008, back at NC State, some of my friends they had set a webcam on his dashboard to get some of the data, and he was training a model to recognize stop signs. This was, almost 2 decades ago now. Okay, next question. You've written about AI's potential to democratize art. What risks do you see in over-reliance on AI tools, and how can creators maintain their unique voice?
Okay. First of all, incredible that Perplexity and R1 have gone this deep into my life. That's cool. I love it. I mean, I need to ask Perplexity questions. So I think the danger, and I'm not too worried about this. I'm not as worried as I was a year or two ago. The danger is that AI will take over and we'll only pay attention to AI things, and we'll all just become soulless husks. Like we're just watching AI generated content. The reason I'm not as concerned anymore is because, sillily enough, of chess and Go and games like that. 2 decades ago, we had a computer that could beat, 3 decades ago. Gosh, it was the mid 90s. We had a computer that could beat the best human player, and it's only gotten better. I mean, what's the name of the something fish? Stockfish. Stockfish is insanely, their ELO score is way above anybody else's. Go, same thing. But nobody pays money to watch 2 AI play. Nobody pays money. Nobody watches 2 AIs play against each other. That's boring as hell. What we want to see is the human drama. If you and I got out a chessboard and started playing, first of all, I would suck. But anyway, but people would watch that. They'd be like, oh, what's the drama? What are they going to move next? All that kind of stuff. Nobody gives a crap if ChatGPT plays Claude in chess. Like who cares? So I think that's the saving grace. I'm like, I hope that this is true for all creative endeavors. People will want the humanity. Yeah, there'll be a period of time when they're like, oh, AI just made this 2-hour movie and not a human was involved. And sure, that'll be a flash in the pan for a little bit. It'll be like, wow, that's super exciting. But then I think people will be like, I want people. I don't care about this. I want people. I care about people. And that's the thing I care about. So I hope it kind of goes that direction. And the good part is that we won't, because of the fact that we won't necessarily have to depend on money, like maybe it won't cost as much, so it'll be less expensive for people to do creative projects, or people will just have more time and more money because we have UBI or something else. That would be my hope, is that we get to pursue this even more and create more cool stuff.
This is a off the cuff question. Yeah. Do you think if or when we will have a Hollywood blockbuster level production film that is either mostly or predominantly created by AI?
A year ago, I would have said 2025. Now I think it's much further away. I've played with Sora. I've played with a lot of Clang. A lot of these video generators, they suck. They're absolutely terrible. And I don't mean that visually. They're fine, but you cannot control them. They have no idea what narrative is. They don't understand how to string together things. The the only way we could do it would be to put it together with people. So you generate a crap ton of AI little clips and then string it together into something, but that's still a human endeavor. Then it just becomes a tool like Photoshop or After Effects or something. It's just a piece, it's a tool in an editor's basket, quiver, whatever. Anyway, so I think it's a ways away because I just don't think they can handle anything that big right now. Similar to like a software engineering task. Like you take a very large software, not like make me a web page, but make me like an entire SaaS platform or something
Make
like
me a
that.
new CRM, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, yeah, it can definitely make pieces of that, but it can't do all of that. And I don't think it's going to have that capability. Now watch, I'm going to
You're
say
right.
this, plant my flag in the ground, and like 6 months from now, they'll be like, first AI movie.
By the way, yeah, no, that tends to happen. But I appreciate that insider knowledge as well, because as someone who writes novels, it's like, yes, an AI can spit out a whole bunch of text, but it's not necessarily going to be that coherent.
I first
and
of
we'll
all
give it
love
time.
your novels. Love like
Oh,
I've read
thank
it.
you.
Yeah. And I also love the fact that you have AI generated covers too, because that was very transparent, and I really thought that was interesting.
Yep.
And covers are good. That's a
Right.
small contained project. The first thing I did with, well, I mean, I guess it's dumb questions, but ChatGPT 3.5 when it came, or 3 when it came out. Anyway, the November, the bombshell that went off a couple of years ago. I said, okay, let's write a novel. And it was like, yeah, cool, outlines, blah, blah, blah. And then it just goes, bleh. And it was absolutely,
Disintegrates.
it was atrocious. It got into, it got like maybe like a, 2 or 3 pages in, and then it was just like completely useless. And I was like, nope. And so I tried with every new version. I have not tried with R1 yet, but I just have found them to be incapable of dealing with anything that large and that creative. They just can't think that big a picture yet.
Yeah, no, in terms of assembling pieces, the latest models are good enough at writing not entire scenes, but passages. You say, all right, I need a passage that describes this. And you actually spend more time describing what you need than it would take to write it.
Right.
In many cases.
But this is where I was talking about earlier, that language and programming are becoming, and programming in a very general sense, but that what you're doing is you're talking to it in a very specific way to get a very specific output. So I absolutely agree. It's not like write me a chapter, write me a science fiction novel, click, or write me the classic thing that we always talk about in 3D animation is like, make me that Pixar movie, click. It's like that button doesn't exist. And a couple of years ago, I was like, ooh, we might be close to that. Now I'm like, no, I don't think so. I just don't think they're capable of stringing together the pieces.
Yep.
So
my wife and I have a writing community, and we had a member of this community say, "What's the best prompt to get Claude to write me an award-winning novel?" And we're like, if that prompt existed, we wouldn't share it,
right.
But it doesn't exist.
Exactly. Wink, wink.
Right. All right. Next question. This will take a right turn. So let me see how you handle this curveball. With the EU's AI Act and similar regulations emerging, how should AI leaders prepare their companies for compliance without stifling innovation? Now, of course, we just elected Trump, so maybe that's not an issue here in America.
Yeah, well, I mean, he just overturned Biden's like gigantic AI Act thing. So, I would actually take a different tack, and I would reach out to the people, all those folks in charge of the EU that are watching this podcast right now, because I know all of them do. I would beg you. I would say, please loosen the reins, for God's sake. You guys are going to become irrelevant. Whoever gets to ASI first wins. I'm very convinced of that. It doesn't matter what else happens. You guys can have all of the regulations you want. You'll be an irrelevant part of the world. So that's what I would say. I would say loosen the reins as fast as humanly possible. And in the EU, that's probably 3 to 4 years from now before they have a committee to decide to talk about it. And then, so unfortunately, that's the reality of the EU. I think there's a lot of good things that they do, but that is over-regulating is a huge downside.
Yep. Well, and that's the thing is like bureaucracy kind of begets more bureaucracy. It's like, oh, well, we need another committee to make a decision about this. And then so you end up with this kind of this sprawl,
Yeah.
bureaucratic
Well,
sprawl.
you coded in C++, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Been a while.
Garbage collection. Garbage
Right.
collection. Oh my gosh. This is exactly what should happen. There should be a giant Hoover just garbage collecting all the regulation.
I love it. Hey, maybe they can borrow some of our Western AI, our American AI to overhaul all of it.
Well, I think America needs to garbage collect too. We've got a lot of regulations there. So
the lawmakers, they just love making more laws, whether or not they're needed.
You want to know my theory? You want to know my theory about civilization?
Okay, let's hear it.
This is a recent one. I just realized this. I was like, you can gauge civilization by how efficiently and how far away your garbage goes from where you are. So think back to the early days, you're pooping out of a tree and it's just like right there. And to the extent now that you don't have to worry about that stuff. And I would say that's also true for the garbage that is regulatory garbage and things, so the garbage can go from literal garbage to metaphorical garbage, but the further away and more efficiently it goes away from you, the more you have a civilization. Now, that's not necessarily all good because then you have giant garbage dumps, which will be really interesting archaeological artifacts, 1,000 years from now. But people will be like, what are all these things? Why are they all in a giant pile? So,
yep. Oh yeah.
But anyway,
and you, the what people leave behind is very interesting.
Yeah.
My wife was an archaeologist briefly in college, and so she
cool.
has all kinds of stories about like, oh, this is a lion bone. It wasn't a lion bone. It was a dog bone or whatever.
Right.
All right.
There you go.
2 questions left. Number 10. Your career spans academia, content creation, and entrepreneurship. How do these roles synergize in shaping your AI leadership style?
Oh man, it blew it all by putting the word synergize in the question. So
what's the entourage effect here?
Yeah, exactly. So I think what's a trichotomy? I think it's a false trichotomy as opposed to a dichotomy. But I think that these things all necessarily inform each other, right? I think academia and having to understand how to communicate sophisticated, sometimes they're simple, sometimes they're very sophisticated ideas to a range of audience members has then informed my ability to do that at a more broad-based level on YouTube. And that all of that has also informed my ability to work in a relative leadership role in my company, which then allows me to recycle that back to teaching again, where it's like, okay, I can help you guys, because I don't just teach undergraduates, but I teach graduate students who they're professionals. They're going out into the world to work. And it's like, okay, how do you assume this leadership role in whatever it is you're going to be doing when you graduate from here? So I think that it's like a big circle where they all kind of inform each other. And academia came first just because that was where I was, and technology didn't really exist, 25 years ago to do YouTube. So that's all slowly built, but I feel like it's this really nice kind of, I don't know. It's a nice little circle there. It's feeding on itself.
Yeah.
Ouroboros. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ouroboros. Yeah. No, I mean, that really resonates with me because I'm like, you're a creative as well. So I don't know, like when I was writing my novel and doing my initial research into cognitive architecture, I would go through phases where it's like, okay, I'm stuck on the novel, so let me just go do some research. And then I'd have more insights about AI, and then the creativity would come back. So yeah, I feel that virtuous cycle myself. All right, final question. You've cited mentorship as key in your MIT professional education course. What's one piece of advice you'd give to aspiring AI leaders navigating today's rapid technological shifts?
Okay. So I never gave an MIT course. I wish I had. That would be really cool. But I still think that, yeah. So that's that. It actually made a mistake and hallucinated. We caught you, R1. But I think that mentorship is actually really, really critical. There's a couple of different levels on it. Again, the big thing, and I know people make fun of teachers all the time, but honestly, try it sometime, folks. If you think you know something, try teaching it to somebody else who doesn't know that thing. You might find that it's a little more complicated than you think it is to teach that person. And that's traditional teaching, which of course can also take the form of mentorship, because then what you're doing is kind of maybe working outside the classroom, more in a creative environment where you're putting a project together and you're working really hard and there's deadlines and you're sort of modeling behavior in addition to teaching content. And I think that modeling of behavior and how to deal with stressful situations is pretty important. And how are you going to, I don't know how you would teach something like that. You could talk all day, but it's more of a, oh, this is how they deal with this. They deal with it with some grace. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have a little meltdown, a little mini meltdown. And then I'm like, yeah, so don't do that.
Right.
Looking at that, don't do that.
No, I mean, but that is still a fantastic answer because again, modeling the behavior because there's the work and then there's the meta work, which is how do you create structure, but then also the how do you regulate yourself or orient yourself towards the whole thing because you give someone a book is great, but there's no substitute for hands-on.
No.
So I love that.
Well, and even beyond that, just some lifestyle choices. For a long time at the beginning of my career, I would not admit to people that I went to the gym every day and worked out because I was embarrassed because I was like, oh, I'm taking time off. Now I'm like proud of that. I'm like, no. And you would appreciate this because I know you've had health, struggles and things like that. And you've had to find a place mentally and physically to go to recuperate. And it's like I'm spending all day long programming, high stress, creative, whatever it is. I'm going to go to the gym. And honestly, my most creative, it's such a creative time. I'm sitting there on my little notes app on my phone going like, ooh, this is a great idea. So, all the ideas I have for videos and stuff, they almost always come at the gym. I'm working out, doing other stuff. And my brain's just like, woo, so it's great. It's like good for my body, good for my brain. It resets me every day. It's something to, weirdly enough, look forward to, even though most people I don't think look forward to it. But, you get to walk in the woods. I unfortunately live in a more urban environment, so can't do that so easily, but yeah.
Excellent. Well, John, this has been an amazing conversation. So thank you so much for coming on and good to talk to you again. I guess just quick closing thought, like what is your hope or aspiration for the rest of 2025, either yourself or the world or what's really resonating for you right now?
I worry about the little people and I include us in that. I think that I'm just concerned that this change is going to happen so rapidly and there's going to be so much disruption to traditional jobs, to the labor market, to people's sense of self-worth, even beyond money. It's just like so many people, including me, are very identified with what they do. And I'm really concerned that we are going to have a very difficult time as a human race negotiating that. And for people who are in leadership positions, beware, because we are the little people. Yeah, we're minions and stuff, but you put enough of us together and this is how revolutions happen, right? This is the danger is if you're not careful, let them eat cake is a really bad last thing to be known about yourself. Marie Antoinette, that's what she's known for. And that's probably not what you want to be known for. So, yeah.
Yep. Very sage advice. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Leaders of AI podcast. This has been David Shapiro, your host today, and Dr. John Gibbs, all of the Dr. Know-It-All podcast and many other endeavors. So thanks, John, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime soon.
Cool. Bye.